In latest test, North Korea detonates its most powerful nuclear device yet. Tokyo, North Korea sharply raised the stakes Sunday in its standoff with the rest of the world, detonating a powerful nuclear device that it claimed was a hydrogen bomb that could be attached to a missile capable of reaching the mainland United States. Even if Kim Jong-un's regime is exaggerating its feats, scientific evidence showed that North Korea had crossed an important threshold and had detonated a nuclear device that was vastly more powerful than its last and almost 7 times the size of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Tensions had already been running high, with Kim repeatedly defying international condemnation and increasingly blunt warnings by President Trump, and continuing to launch ballistic missiles. But Sunday's blast, North Korea's 6th nuclear test but the first since Trump took office, could escalate those tensions to a new level. Trump sharply condemned the test, saying North Korea is very hostile and dangerous to the United States. In a pair of tweets issued Sunday morning, Trump wrote, "North Korea has conducted a major nuclear test. Their words and actions continue to be very hostile and dangerous to the United States. North Korea is a rogue nation which has become a great threat and embarrassment to China, which is trying to help but with little success." Trump also delivered an admonishment of sorts to South Korea, saying that appeasement with North Korea will not work and suggesting that more severe steps must be taken to influence Kim's regime. China said Sunday that it resolutely opposes and strongly condemns the launch, adding to denunciations from South Korea and Japan. The nuclear device that North Korea tested appeared to be so large that Vipin Rang, an expert on nuclear proliferation and strategy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, called it a city buster. Now, with even relatively inaccurate intercontinental ballistic missile technology, they can destroy the better part of a city with this yield, Common Rang said. Don't be surprised by North Korea's missiles. Kim Jong-un is doing what he said he would. The nuclear test took place at exactly noon local time at North Korea's Punggye testing site and was recorded as a 6.3 magnitude earthquake, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. It was followed 8 minutes later by a 4.1 magnitude earthquake that appeared to be a tunnel collapsing at the site. Every day, North Koreans are told that the Americans are imperialists and North Korean children are taught that cunning American wolves want to kill them. To understand why, we need to go back to the Korean War. Anna Fifield, Jason Baldag, The Washington Post. Japan immediately sent up sniffer planes to try to measure radiation levels. North Korean state media said the test was carried to determine the accuracy and credibility of its H-bomb to be placed at the payload of the ICBM. North Korea tested its intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time in July, and its second test later that month showed that the rocket could theoretically reach Denver or Chicago. Those launches caused Trump to warn that if North Korea continued its provocations, it would face fire and fury. He later tweeted that the U.S. military was locked and loaded. North Korean television on Sunday broadcast footage of Kim signing the order to detonate. Sunday's test, part of the regime's plan for building a strategic nuclear force, was a perfect success, the state-run Korean Central News Agency said. Earlier Sunday, KCNA had released photos of Kim inspecting what was described as a hydrogen bomb that could be attached to an ICBM, the same device that appeared to have been detonated just hours later. All the components of the H-bomb were homemade, so North Korea could produce powerful nuclear weapons as many as it wants, the KCNA quoted Kim as saying. North Korea's latest launch suggests it rejects both U.S. threats and offers to talk. Analysts were poring over the photos and the data Sunday, especially questioning North Korea's claim to have produced a 2-stage thermonuclear weapon. David Albright, a nuclear weapons expert and president of the Institute for Science and International Security, was skeptical of North Korea's claims and said the photos were probably propaganda. But there was no doubt that North Korea was making progress. South Korean officials and independent nuclear scientists estimated the amount of energy released by the weapon to be 100 kilotons. That would make it almost 7 times as strong as the U.S. atomic bomb that destroyed the Japanese city of Hiroshima in 1945. At that level, North Korea's nuclear device would be very significant and destabilizing, Albright said. It would show that their design, whatever the specific design, has achieved a yield that is capable of destroying substantial parts of large modern cities. South Korea's meteorological agency said Sunday's explosion was as much as 6 times the size of the fifth test, in September last year, and 11 times the size of the January 2016 detonation. Still, Albright doubted that North Korea had been able to make such a warhead small enough to fit onto a missile. After firing increasingly long-range missiles, including the 2 that can theoretically reach the U.S. mainland, into the sea between the Korean peninsula and Japan, North Korea last week sent a missile over Japan and into the Pacific Ocean, claiming it was capable of reaching Guam, U.S. territory. Analysts said that appeared to be a dummy run for firing an ICBM on a normal trajectory over Japan and into the Pacific, instead of straight up and straight down as with its first 2 tests. Although governments and experts would continue to assess the technical aspects of the latest nuclear test, Rang said the danger is significant, regardless of whether this was a lesser boosted fission device or a true hydrogen bomb, or whether North Korea had mastered the technology to deliver this accurately to a target. It really doesn't matter now from a deterrence perspective, he said. Made it on the ICBM. You don't want this thing anywhere near a city near you. North Korea could cross ICBM threshold next year, U.S. officials warn in new assessment. Sunday's test caused anger across the region, with South Korean President Moon Jae-in saying he would never allow North Korea to continue advancing its nuclear and missile technologies, according to his national security advisor. South Korean military leaders warned North Korea that they, together with their American allies, were fully equipped to punish North Korea. But Trump later admonished the Moon government. South Korea is finding, as I have told them, that their talk of appeasement with North Korea will not work. They only understand one thing! He wrote in a third Sunday morning tweet. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he would not tolerate the nuclear test. Abe had spoken with Trump 3 hours before the test and said afterward that they had agreed to increase pressure on North Korea and make it change its policies. The White House said the 2 leaders discussed ongoing efforts to maximize pressure on North Korea. Trump made the call from Air Force One, as he returned home to Washington from his visit to storm-battered Texas and Louisiana. The 2 leaders reaffirmed the importance of close cooperation between the United States, Japan and South Korea in the face of the growing threat from North Korea, the White House statement said. All eyes will turn to China to see whether it will be angry enough to impose true punishment on North Korea. China has expressed annoyance at North Korea's frequent ballistic missile launches, but analysts have said that Beijing probably would not take serious action unless there is another nuclear test. China's primary concern is stability on its borders, and it has shied away from implementing sanctions that would seriously undermine the regime in Pyongyang, analysts have said. Almost all international sanctions, such as recent bans on coal and seafood exports, rely on Chinese enforcement because about 90% of North Korean trade goes through China. China's foreign ministry said Sunday that North Korea had conducted the nuclear test with no regard to the general objections of the international community. The Chinese government resolutely opposes and strongly condemns this, the ministry said in a statement. China will work together with the international community to comprehensively and completely implement the relevant resolutions of the Security Council of the UN, unswervingly push forward the denuclearization of the peninsula, and unswervingly maintain the peace and stability of the peninsula, it said. Philip Rucker in Washington, Yoon Jung-seo in Seoul, and Emily Rahala and Shirley Feng in Beijing contributed to this report.
The North Korean regime hates the United States. Every day, North Koreans are told that the Americans are imperialists, aggressors, and hostile. North Korean children are taught that cunning American wolves want to kill them. To understand where this hatred is coming from, we need to go back to the Korean War. After the US and Soviet Union agreed to split the peninsula at the 38th parallel, Kim Il-sung was installed as the North's communist leader. In 1950, he tried to reunify the Koreas by force. The northern forces pushed down the peninsula, capturing Seoul.
A highly trained and well-equipped North Korean army swarmed across the 38th parallel to attack unprepared South Korean defenders. Caught off guard,
A surprise landing at Incheon by General Douglas MacArthur turned the tide of the war and cut off the North supply lines. The American-led UN forces moved deep into North Korea, capturing Pyongyang. But when the Chinese intervened, the fighting was pushed back to where it all began, the 38th parallel.
Chinese communist troops crossed the Manchurian border and helped the North Korean Reds drive back UN forces.
For the next 2.5 years, neither side made any headway. Most Americans have forgotten or never knew that the Korean War was a brutal one. It devastated the peninsula, and the North got the worst of it. The United States dropped 635,000 tons of bombs in Korea, compared with the 503,000 tons dropped in the entire Pacific theater during World War II. U.S. bombers decimated the North. After bombing urban targets, the U.S. hit dams, flooding farmland. Air Force commanders complained that they'd run out of targets. This, in part, has fueled the North Korean narrative, helping keep the Kim family in power for almost 7 decades. From the very real events of the Korean War, North Korea's propagandists have created a version of history that is designed to keep the shock and horror alive. According to the North Korean version of events, the South, backed by their imperialist allies, started the conflict, which is painted as a patriotic war fought against American invaders. North Koreans know it as the victorious Fatherland Liberation War. The regime has used anti-Americanism as an ideological tool, keeping its citizens in constant fear of an imminent American attack. When tensions between North Korea and the US escalate, the North turns up the volume on its propaganda machine. This helps it unify North Koreans against a supposed external threat. At the Sinchon Museum of American War Atrocities, the narrative of American aggression is kept alive. According to North Korean state media, a major expansion in July 2015 turned it into a center for anti-US class education. The Korean Central News Agency reported in March that more than 18,000 people visited the museum in the first 10 days of the month. KCNA went on to say that the hearts of the visitors were burning with the resolution to punish the US imperialists and the South Korean warmongers.